Hello, Diane here at PhotoFluent. Welcome to our weekly live program this week on Wednesday. Why did I have to change it this week? Well, since you asked, I am taking a little trip to Sonoma tomorrow to do some wine tasting and to research, maybe some photography workshop possibilities. Because what better subject to take photos of than wine and the whole process? I just love it. The grapes, the vineyards, you know, the just the whole process from grape to bottle. Fascinating to me. So I'm going to do a little research. It's not all tough to be doing research for photography excursions. And yeah, I will be tasting some wine along the way. So that means today, Wednesday, we're going live. And I was thinking, what should we talk about? And how I pick my topic is generally what my questions are that are coming in and what kind of feedback I'm getting from my students. Here's some of the feedback I got regarding photo editing. I wanted to throw my computer out the window. And I thought, we need to talk about photo editing again. It's one of those topics that often people say, I know I should, I know I want to, but I'm afraid, so I just don't do it. Or I've gone down this rabbit hole and I don't know how to get out because it's so overwhelming. I hear a lot of both of those schools of thought. It's something I want to try, but I haven't yet. It's like a hot stove, they're afraid to touch it. Other people have touched it and they just can't get away from it and they're frustrated because they feel like there's so much to learn. So what I thought we would do today is just dip our toe in a little bit. I actually wrote a blog post about this ways back. Thought it's a good resource depending on how you like to learn. Some people like to read, some people like to hear, so you get both today. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to do a Lightroom demo, and then you can read the blog post that kind of fill in the cracks later. So of course I'll link to that to make it all easier. And my editing platform of choice is Lightroom. I think it's delightful that it keeps your photos organized. It doesn't do it for you. You have to do a little work, but there's really easy systems to organize and edit your photos all in the same place. So that's where we're going today. And we're just going to do 5 basic edits that every photo almost can't always do extremes like that, but most every photo will benefit from. So when we jump over, it gets a little weird. So here we go. Hopefully you can see my screen. Everything looks good because I can't see both what you see and what I see. It's just a little tricky sometimes. So let's get started. Here is Lightroom. We're going to be in the Develop module. And we've talked about this type of photo before. It's very common when you travel that you have this really bright area and a really dark area all in the same photo because it's middle of the day often when you're walking around taking photos. And that means bright light and then shadows. What do you do with these photos? And this isn't specifically just for those type of photos. Often what you're going to do is first, don't touch the exposure. That's not even one of the 5. I know people often go there first. Like you might look at this and think too dark and automatically go to the exposure and brighten it. No. What that does is it brightens everything. And then you can see the sky got even brighter. We don't want that. I know sometimes the feedback I get from people, and I used to experience this same thing, you look at your photo and think, I know it doesn't look great, but I don't know what to do with it. So I honestly recommend starting here with these 5 things. First, we're going to bring the highlights down, which means to the left. See that little slider in our basic panel on the right. Bring the highlights down. Bring the shadows up. So you could see how that affected each area of the photos. The highlights are that really bright cloud up there, the shadows were down here. Let's go back so you can see where it started. Yeah. We're going to bring the highlights again down, which means left, shadows up, which means right. It starts to even out the bright and dark areas, but then it gets a little flat, right? Because even isn't always good for our eyes. So the third slider I'm going to show you today is the clarity slider, and that affects the midtones. So you're going to slide that to the right, and that gives it some more pop in the midtones. I'm doing these 100% just to show you the extremes, but how I generally take my sliders around is, say I'm in the clarity slider here, I usually go to the right or left, whichever way I'm going, but clarity is generally to the right, until it starts to look a little maybe cartoony or too much, and then I bring it down. So and that's for color, brightness, contrast. Every time I use a slider, I'll go too far and then pull it back down. That's just kind of a general thing I do, because experimenting is really how you find what you like in your style. If you think, I don't have a style yet, I had those same thoughts in my mind a while ago. And then I started to see a pattern of how I developed my photos and thought, I like high contrast. I like vibrance. At the time, that kind of ethereal, super bright, muted colors was in style. And so I thought, should I edit like that? But that's not how I like to look at photos. So I just decided I'm going to edit high contrast, vibrant, not too vibrant, and more on the natural side. That's just how I like to do it. But you'll figure it out playing with the sliders. All right, so we have 3 sliders so far: highlights, shadows, clarity. The other thing I like to do is contrast. What I hear from my students is it's dull, there's not enough pop, it's not very wow is a word I hear. Contrast can help you with that. 3 ways that you can do contrast. First, you could just go up here to the contrast slider to the right and you get contrast. All right. The other way you can get contrast is down here. You bring the whites up and the blacks down. And I'll often do that. You have a little more control. If you want a lot of contrast, you can do both. Bring the contrast slider a little bit and bring the whites and blacks, whites up, blacks down. You have to be a little careful with the whites, especially if you already have kind of a blown out or bright area. The farther you bring the whites over, the more blown out it can get. But I do like the whites to brighten your image. If you feel like it's just a little dull, the whites is where to go rather than the exposure, because the whites brighten it. The exposure is a little heavy-handed. It brings the whole thing up. So I bring the blacks down, the whites up. Now here's a third way to adjust your contrast. That's the tone curve. You can grab the curve directly and do it there, or this is how I do it. I go with the sliders here. You can bring the highlights up, the whites up, the darks down, and the darks down. That, bringing them way over like this, I'm going to exaggerate for effect. That is contrast. So you can see where it really has that pop. It starts to look a little cartoony if it gets too contrasty, but hey, maybe you like that. That's okay. It's really what you like when you edit your photos. And if you think that's too much, then you just pull them back in a little bit. But that is the third way to get contrast. I don't generally do that much. And it's another thing I'm a little careful with the highlights. If I've brought them down up on the basic panel, I don't want to just crank them back up here in the tone curve. So let's review that. In the basics panel, you can change contrast. You can give extra contrast with the contrast slider by increasing whites, decreasing blacks, And then you go down to the tone curve panel for the third option. You can either grab the curve directly, and you can grab it in different places and bring it up and down, or you can adjust the sliders, highlights and lights up a little bit, which means to the right, darks and shadows down to the left a little bit. Right? I think that is 4. Highlights, shadows, clarity, and contrast. And you can already see the difference in this photo. Look at the difference between the before and after. It's huge. That is with 4 adjustments. Now I did a couple of different contrasts, but 4 categories of adjustments. And it would take a few minutes. Now let me show you the last one that I think adds a little boost to almost every photo, and that is Vibrance. Sometimes they don't need them if it's a really beautiful, colorful scene, but depending on your lighting, sometimes the colors you remember don't come out in the photo. Like you think, I remember this being really vibrant and warm or colorful, and you get the photo back and it's a little dull. Vibrance can help with that. And Vibrance versus saturation. Vibrance is a little less, it protects some of the tones, where saturation, it saturates everything and it can get too heavy in the color department too fast, especially with the oranges and yellows. I'll show you. You put up a little saturation and you immediately start to see some orange and yellow. Too much. Versus Vibrance, it increases the color, but it protects the orange and yellow tones. And especially if you have faces, human skin, the color gets really weird fast if you saturate. Sometimes if I have a lot of people, I'll even desaturate just a smidge and then increase the vibrance. And it helps your skin tones stay a more normal color. But Vibrance can really help. You can see here like the blue reflection of the sky and the window starts to pop out, the sky starts to pop out, and yet you still don't get too much yellow and orange in the building. So now let's look at our before and after. 5 basic edits. Here you go, right? I'm going to do one from beginning to end so that you can see which one. This one. Put it back there. Yeah. All right. This one. Okay. So this is another one. This is in Venice. And you can see that it is the high contrast and it's kind of dull. So we're going to just quickly go through this now. We have highlights down. Whoops, why are we doing that? We have shadows up. Then we have clarity. And then we have contrast. I'm going to go up with the white a little bit, down with the black. And I'm going to go here to the tone curve. I might do a little extra contrast because you know I said I like it. So why not? And now I'm going to go back here to the Vibrance and give it some of that. So let's look at the before and after. I'm not sure if I have a good, no, I don't. Okay, so can't see before and after because I have a different version saved. I'm just going to show you here. Oh, I know how. You can't see them side by side, but I'll show you. Here's the before. And here's the after. Crazy, right? You saw how fast I did that. So my suggestion to you, let's go back here. My suggestion to you is, if you're interested in editing, and I'm telling you, every photo you see out there has been edited in some way. So if you're comparing your photos, if you want to put your photos out there, if you want to share your photos, if you really want to like your photos, you got to do a little editing. It's just part of the process of photography. If you've thought before, hey, I want to try that out, but you're afraid because it's intimidating to use new software, stop, just try these out. Five little sliders. You can do that. I'm also going to include a how to download Lightroom to get started, because sometimes you get into Adobe and think, now, where am I going? What should I click here? So I walk you through how to get that downloaded and how to get started. All right. If you want to try. They have a free trial. You can get in there and try it for a couple weeks and say, yeah, I want to learn more about this. Or it's easy the way it is. You know, with these 5 sliders, I don't care if I go further than that. I think you'll want to. You might get addicted and really want to learn more. But to start, get into Lightroom, give it a try. And if you start to get overwhelmed, step away. Just walk away for a little while and then come back and try again later. Okay? So I'm going to link to the how to get Lightroom installed and the blog post that outlines these and gives you a little more detail. I also talk about RAW versus JPEG files, which is a handy one. And there we have it. Our live for this week, all about getting started with editing. You can do it. Come on over to our Facebook group, Photo Fluent Travelers, and let me know how you're doing with your editing. Do you do it a lot? Are you afraid? Do you get frustrated? Tell me all this stuff. I want to hear it. And if you're watching me on YouTube, hey, don't forget to subscribe, because more videos will be coming. I'll see you next week. Yes, next week.